mics are hot.
On camera 6, playback.
Coming out of graphics.
Live
and
all
camera
around.
6 and 7 are
Audio
hot.
speeding.
Hi there, I'm Corey Behnke with LiveX, and I am talking to a friend that I've had for over a decade and a producer, Mitch Jacobson from Category 5 Studios. Mitch, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Corey. It's a pleasure to be here.
Mitch, tell me a little bit about Category 5 Studios and what you guys really are trying to do, and what are the problems you try to solve for at Category 5?
Category 5 Studios is my production company that I use to create, produce, direct, edit broadcast television programs and also direct live stream events. I handle the creative side of things during the show. I'm also a technical director and video engineer. So I've been building studios for companies all over the country, and I do some training as well. And it's been a lifelong pursuit. I've been in the business for over 40 years now. I started out in 1901.
Well, and a little,
it seems like.
Yeah, right. Me too. It's little known fact about you, I'll always like to tell people, is that you literally wrote a book on multi-camera directing.
I did. It was a labor of love and started as a dare from some of my colleagues. And I took them up on the dare, and I wrote the book, and it was a great experience. It's helped a lot of people. It recently was adopted by the Berklee School of Music.
Oh, wow.
And it's also in other colleges and universities around the world.
Nice. Oh, can you talk to me about like the scope of the initial project that you when the client called you and was like, "Hey, here's what we're thinking."
So during the pandemic, I'd been doing a lot of work for a producer named Aaron Friedman, who owns the Make Music Alliance company. And he hired me to do concert events on a global level for the National Association of Music Merchandisers, NAMM. They produce conventions, and during the pandemic, they couldn't do their regular concert event at the convention center because they shut it down and went virtual. So they hired us to produce a global virtual concert event. And that's where we put together the system to interact with music groups from all over the world in a live concert. When I was doing that from my COVID studio.
Nice.
Last year, Aaron called me up, and he said, "We've got this really cool project this year to work with the Olympics." So the Cultural and Olympic Heritage Committee wanted to do a global concert event like we had done for NAMM. And they asked if we could do this live with 24 bands in 24 different countries.
Wow. Wow.
Their theme or their idea was to use the metaphor of passing the Olympic torch between each country. So they would do a set and then pass the torch to the next country, and we would go around the horn all over the world and end up in Paris for the, grand opening event with tens of thousands of people, and the live stage with the IMAG and all of that. So we would land there, and then they kick off their events.
And everything's live.
Live for 4 hours, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I guess based on what you had already kind of done with Aaron, what was the missing piece you felt like in, not just that VVCR gave you, but what were kind of some of the solutions you knew you were going to try to have to solve for?
So the Olympic Committee threw a little monkey wrench at us, not last minute, but enough time to figure it out. Their metaphor for passing the torch was going to be a musical theme, rhythmic theme that they called the Pulse. Yeah. And they named the concert Pulsations based on this pulse. And the idea was, instead of passing a global torch to each country physically, we would have the band that's on stage wrap their setup by breaking down into a rhythmic pulse that would then keep going until we could bring on the next act. They would hear that and join along with the pulse.
Oh, wow.
And then take over and do their set.
Oh,
So the
wow.
rhythmic pulse became the torch.
Which, wow, how did you deal with that? I mean, latency is always fun. I mean,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
funny thing is if you're on a pulse, like on a 200 millisecond delay, even if you're inside of the bottom of it, probably at some point you can kind of match, but it sounds like that would be a latency like conundrum.
Well, I love a good challenge. And I didn't want to say no. So we tried to figure out a way to make that work. And what we ended up doing for the pulse was recording 100 beats per minute pulse that was the exact tempo template for each band. And we sent that by email in advance so that they knew when they break it down to the pulse, it had to be 100 beats per minute. And they knew what the pulse sounded like. So they could recreate that any way they wanted to. It was freedom creatively for them. It didn't have to be the exact pulse. They could do it on a kazoo or a flute or a full band or whatever, as long as they had that rhythmic pulse
So
that
the
we
so
could then
the
tag onto.
so the idea was is that on the head end and the tail end, the band could be creative, but the actual rhythm would merge everything together, right?
Right. And now merging them together with latency was my next problem. Um, we decided to hire technical directors in each country.
Okay.
So I had a team of 24 TDs, stage managers on site for each band.
Okay.
And we got together on a massive Zoom call for that. And I took the output of my control room from the VVCR and grabbed a stream and put that into the Zoom call.
Got it.
And the Zoom call is actually very low latency.
Yep.
And I figured
About
that would,
150 to a 200 milliseconds, I believe, for most
yeah,
times. Yeah.
yeah. And also, that's an easy thing for everybody to do all over the world.
Yep.
So, by feeding the control room program master with audio into the Zoom, it would land in each country, and they could use that output to feed in-ear monitors or stage monitors to hear the band that's playing.
What were some of the features of VVCR that you used the most and that kind of helped you offload some of those tasks?
Sure. Well, actually, not part of VVCR, but part of LiveX is Rivet.
Yep.
And so we used Rivet as at first. That was the first thing we set up with the axe because it made it super easy for them to get a link, log right in off of a Mac, a PC, iPhone, or Android. And we used all of it um, to get into the show. We had to make it easy for the acts because we knew from NAMM and doing other shows that that was sometimes hard for the bands to do tech on the side, to get
Well, and
in. And
you wanted SRT because of the quality, right?
right, we wanted SRT because of the quality. And with Rivet, we have control of the SRT. There's return video. It makes it easier for the acts, and it made it easy for me to keep track of everything. So we started with Rivet. We got everybody into the show. And then some of the other things that we did with VVCR is, we in our cluster of computers, we had a streaming server, an NDI discovery server, a master control room for cutting the show. And then we also had a post production instance that we used for editing in Premiere Pro during the program.
So did each TD did the technical director in each concert, did they give you a line cut that then went into your VVCR master control vMix?
Yes, yes. I got one stream from each country.
Got it.
And it varied around the world because we were representing different countries with different music styles and different levels of technology and celebrity.
Yeah.
So there might be a band playing in the stadium with 7 cameras and full concert lighting and sound, and they would pass the torch to a guy in his basement in Argentina with an iPhone.
Wow. So what were you doing during the whole show? Were you master production manager? Were you TD? I mean, obviously you were the main producer, but like what
Yeah.
was your like, actual like what buttons were you pushing?
Well, I did it as a one-man band. I directed the show and I TD'd it using a stream deck. that
Nice.
could talk to the VVCR computers. So I had, my computer on my desktop was just a simple laptop, a good laptop that I used to connect to the cloud. And then once I was in the cloud, all the power of all the computers and worked up there. But my Stream Deck was on my desk, and that would redirect to the cloud, and I could
Got it.
control the cloud computers using Stream Deck.
So basically, your laptop was connected via nice DCV to AWS.
Yeah, and I had a couple monitors for that. Plus I had a separate computer for the Zoom stuff and a couple other things, monitoring all my administrative. I had a chart that I used to keep track of each country, each technical director, contact information, their links for the Rivet, their links for the Zoom. All of that stuff was like in a big spreadsheet. And I had a separate computer on the side where I could keep that going. And then we would call in the TDs from the different countries into the Zoom call. We had like a holding room for everybody, and then we would use a breakout room for whoever's on air and on deck.
Got it.
And just those two people are now I'm talking to them, telling them, okay, here they're breaking it down. There's the transition. We're into the pulsation now. And then we would take the next guy would tell his band to start with the pulsation. They would pull that in, listen to it, start to match it. And then once they're matching it, and I know that both of them are set, I would use triggers and shortcuts in vMix to automate the system, shrink down the current band to a 2 box with graphics, their country, their name, the logo, and they would jam for a couple seconds together on the pulse. And then I pull up the next band, they would start their set, and then we'd release the band that just finished and bring the next one on deck.
Okay.
Big shout out to my guru graphics guy, Aaron Stern out of London. Check out Aaron Stern Graphics. He's amazing. And he also taught me a lot.
Got it. So you basically made macros with the templated sequences so that each sequence as you're coming in and out of the pulse was similar.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. And I was able to do it myself because the macros allowed me to control a lot of things with a couple of buttons.
Nice. Well, one question I have is, okay, so going into the project, what did you think was going to be the hardest thing? And then what ended up being the hardest thing?
I thought that matching the tempos between countries would be the hardest thing. And I was right. That was the hardest. That was the hardest part of it.
I mean, it sounds like the hardest part of it, to be honest with you. And so how did that end up? Was, out of the 24 bands, like was it all seamless between that or was it difficult at moments or, what were some of the challenges
There was a
there?
few that were difficult, but mostly it worked. I'd say that like one of the biggest challenges with the pulsation was mixing audio because I was working as a one-man band, so I'm managing all these streams and managing all these countries TDs and trying to keep up with everything, and at the same time cutting the show and mixing audio, especially during the transitions where the audio mix was crucial. So using the triggers and the automation in vMix, I could actually raise and lower the potentiometers for the volumes in each country using the triggers to match that up for whoever's on deck and whoever's on air at that time. And the triggers were great because as I'd go to the next act, the trigger would set up the next one, with the macros and stuff. So the biggest problem with all of that, other than the whole situation itself, was that we didn't really have a way to rehearse it. And so to actually test that out, I needed to have two bands that would give me a lot of time to practice and then program the automations. And we tried that with two countries I won't name. But language was also a barrier, so we had translators involved. Wow. and the other countries spoke English mostly, so it worked out pretty well, but we weren't able to rehearse it as much as I wanted to. So I had to just kind of run with it at during the show. My macros all worked and everything, but there were times when I had to raise the volumes a little more or get out of it quicker because they didn't get it. My backup was to use the original template pulse
Mm,
and be able, I had a trigger where I could bring that in anytime I wanted
got it.
to give better sound quality to the handoff.
What you know, talk to me about how it went. What surprised you about how it went, besides the fact that I know it went well? But tell me about like, what you thought it was going to be and what it ended up being.
Well, I had done a couple of these global live stream concert events with Aaron before, so I kind of had a feeling what I knew what it would be, but I'd never done it in the cloud before. So having VVCR as my partner on this technology partner, I was really comfortable knowing that we could handle anything that they threw at us. There was one instance with the LA stage where they, at the last minute, had to go to a different Zoom show during the same time because their band double booked themselves.
Okay.
So, so we had to switch gears at the last minute and flip their SRT to get an incoming RTMP that they were providing to be able to do it to Zoom and or to YouTube and to our show. So one of the advantages of VVCR is you can flip streams and
Yep.
right instantaneously to whatever format you need. So there wasn't really anything that was going to be thrown at me that I didn't feel that I couldn't do, and that gave me like the confidence to just focus on the show.
Well, Mitch, thank you so much for joining me and talking about your experience. I look forward to hearing more show stories from VVCR and Category 5 Studios.
Thanks a lot, Corey.